All right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ann Johnson, and I am the facilitator for today's Managing Your Insurance Needs. With me is Jeff Stewart, also from Professional Engineering Services, and he's going to be the main instructor. We're going to get started today just with introductions and just with talking a little bit about this series of classes. This is the 5th series of classes that MnDOT has sponsored with PE Services as its consultant. The first one was creating a business capability statement. Then we did creating a business portfolio. We did creating a Facebook and managing or using social media for marketing. So those are the first 4 classes. Now we have insurance, and then next week we have contracts. So you'll continue to get those invitations and prompts to attend. Again, all will be recorded, but an extra interesting part of this contract is MnDOT has encouraged and enabled our staff at PE Services to meet with anybody on any of these classes, either in person or via Zoom as a follow-up if you need more information. Insurance, for example, is sometimes pretty foreign and complicated. So if you need any help as we conclude this class, we'll ask you to let us know. We'll follow up with an email if you haven't let us know yet, and we'll make sure that if you need additional assistance, we're here for you. Also, the 4 classes that have been offered previously, if you watch those recordings and you need help, it's not like you can only get help for the classes that you are attending. So please reach out to me. I'm the lead on this project. My contact information was in the Zoom and in the invite, and so we'll look forward to hearing from all of you. As is typical, I will ask students or participants to introduce themselves and just tell us what your business is, and we'll do that shortly. But I just want to introduce myself. My name, again, is Ann, and I started Professional Engineering Services in 1995 as a one-person disadvantaged business. I'm certified as a woman-owned business. We're also certified as a TGB, a targeted group business. And I have built this business from just myself working at my home in the basement all the way up till now. We have 35 plus or minus people. And we do about $4 to $5 million in business a year. So it has been a long time, and I have struggled through all of the issues that we're talking about in this series. I've been there. So we know the problems and the challenges that small businesses face, and I'm happy to share my insight. Jeff Stewart is going to share all the information on insurance today. The first 4 classes, we had participants actually work through things and do worksheets. Today, there's just too much information. So what we're going to do today is present, allow for questions, and do follow-up meetings if you need. All right, so I see that we have one more person attending. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Jeff. I'm going to do you last. So Ross is with PE Services, and I'm going to ask Ross to introduce himself and just briefly. Ross?
Yep, thanks, Ann. Yeah, so I'm Ross Gentink. I also work at PE Services. I'm our CFO. That I'm succeeding Jeff Stewart, and he's spent the last 15 years or so here getting everything organized. So my job's quite a bit easier. But yeah, so I'm auditing this course. I'll be teaching a couple courses coming up, and so I figured this one was a good one to watch, and I'll learn some things here too. So thank you, Ann.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Ross. All right, Angie, do you mind just telling us who you are and what your business is?
Hi, my name is Angie. I'm with Banks Electric Company. It's a small minority-owned business in Minneapolis.
Do you do electric contracting?
Yeah, electrical contracting. Yep.
Wow, excellent. Love having you. Thanks, Angie. Lorenzo.
Good morning, Ann. Thank you, Jeff, everybody. My name is Lorenzo Puente. and I do demolition. I mean, that's the focus of our goal to type of work we want to do. And I want to make sure I have the right insurance. I don't want to go out to a job, not be insured for anything, equipment, workman's comp, and that sort of insurance needs that we require.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lorenzo. Business is different than personal, and in full disclosure, we didn't have the right insurance at several times during our history. So it's a scary thing. All right, welcome. Rose, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yep, I'm Rose Stensrud. I am the office manager at Shepherd Data Services, which is a legal services company, woman-owned in downtown Minneapolis.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Lauren and Amber, or Lauren or Amber.
Amber here. Thank you. I am the president of Beach Transport, Inc. We specialize in road construction material transportation with side dumps, belly dumps, and dump trucks. And insurance is very big in the construction industry. So that is why I am attending this course here.
Great. Somebody texted me just as you were talking. Are you Amber?
Yes, I'm Amber. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Amber.
Yep.
Lisa, good morning. Can you introduce yourself and just briefly tell us what you do? I can't hear Lisa. Jeff, can you hear?
No.
Lisa, we can't hear you. All right. Oh, Lisa. Lisa is texting me. She's in legal. All right. I think that's Lisa. Lisa, text me back if that was just you. All right. Is that Lawview? Who is Lawvue?
Yes, it is me.
Oh, so you're texting me.
Yeah, I just texted you.
All right, can you introduce me, give me your first name, and just tell us a little bit about what kind of legal work you do?
Yeah, what I do is snow removal.
Okay.
And so the name of the company is Law Snow LLC. And we're working towards also getting into like lawn care also. So we're
Okay.
working on that. But the reason I want to attend these classes is to learn more about how to get insured and whatnot, because I'm new at this. This is the first business I've started. So
Good.
a little goes a long way. So I like to learn from all you guys and learn what we can all help each other with.
Excellent. So I misunderstood. So your name is Law?
Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome,
Yep.
Law. It's nice to have you. And Lisa, can you see if you can unmute yet? All right. Well, Lisa texted me this morning and she's with Durst Outset. Oh, her speaker is not working. That's okay. So Lisa's with Durst Outdoor Services and she just put her introduction into the chat. So let's see what she says. All right. Excellent. Well, welcome, Lisa. It's good to have you. Michelle Call. Michelle? Can you introduce yourself? What kind of business do you have?
Yeah, I'm Michelle Call with Kismet Consulting, and I have a transportation civil engineering company.
Oh, you're Michelle.
Mhm.
Hi, Michelle. I know you.
Hi.
Hey, I know Michelle.
Michelle was my student. Sorry, I don't usually remember students' married names, so it's good to have you. And then lastly, Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. My name's Matt McIntosh. I work with MnDOT, and I work with Tracy, who is the program manager here, or project manager that works with Ann. So I'm just happy to be here and excited to see what's going on.
Excellent. Well, thanks. And Matt, I know I owe you a phone call. So just in full disclosure, we'll let you know the arrangement here. Jeff and I are married, and he has been a huge asset to me as I grew my business. As Ross said, he joined the firm about 15 years ago. And I'm the engineer. He's an engineer too, but he helped me figure out all of this business stuff. It is really challenging. Several of you said that in your introduction. So we understand. Jeff and I are also traveling, so you can see me in the back of Jeff's blurred background. And so we'll try to keep this kind of as if I'm in another room, but I'm going to monitor the chat. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or just unmute and yell it out. We are very informal, and the main goal of this whole virtual training series is to help you and to make sure that you have all the tools you need to succeed and to get your business up and running. So there's no dumb questions. If there are, I asked them, all of them 25 years ago. So we have been there, and I really want you to feel comfortable either just interrupting us, raising your hand, or putting a question in the chat. And with that, I will introduce Jeff Stewart. He is our outgoing CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and he is the insurance guru for today. So Jeff, take it away.
All right, thank you. As people have mentioned, I work for PE Services, and actually I started in 2010, so it's only been 13 years, not 15. But prior to that, I worked for consulting firms my entire career. So I've spent over 40 years in the business, in the business environment, working for private consultants my whole career. And I actually worked with Ross quite a few years ago at a different firm. And it's kind of fun to have him take over for me as CFO, and looking forward to seeing how that plays out here over time. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And so here's our start of our presentation. So I have a question that I want to ask everyone. Do you have any insurance yourself? And I would like it if you would type the kinds of insurance you have personally in the chat, and just to kind of get an idea of what kind of insurance you have personally. So Ann is monitoring the chat here. So
I think Jeff just wants to draw the parallel between, yep, health, dental, et cetera. Rose is right on.
Right. Anybody else? Anybody insure their house or their property or cars or life insurance or anything like that? Yeah, Lauren and Amber had listed quite a few of those. So these are the kinds of insurance that we have personally, and for businesses, we need those kinds of insurances plus more. So I'll so the types of insurances we need for businesses, we have liability insurance, and let's see, my presentation got a little bit out of order. Here we go. So we have liability insurance, property insurance, automobile, and employment. And I'm going to give you one recommendation here that I really think that all businesses should have, and that is to get an insurance broker. We did this quite a few years ago, and the insurance broker really helps us with all types of insurance. What the main thing that they do is they are able, so for instance, if you need some liability insurance, they'd be able to help you shop that out. So they have access to all kinds of different companies that provide all kinds of different insurance, and they act as a go between the insurance companies and you, in helping you pick the insurance that best fits your business. So for instance, if you were looking for general liability insurance, they would go to certain companies and price that out for your business depending on the type of business you have. And then they would present that price to you, and you would pick that company that best fits your needs. So so obviously the different types of insurance, there's liability insurance, which protects you against lawsuits and errors. There's professional liability insurance that we have at PE Services that we do a little bit of design work. And occasionally when we do that, we have to protect ourselves in case we make a mistake and it causes harm to the client. So we'd have professional liability insurance. And one thing to note about professional liability insurance is it's the amount of your premium is totally tied to the amount of revenue that your firm generates. So professional liability insurance is something that the premium changes on a yearly basis, especially if your business is growing. So over the years, our insurance has gone up substantially with the increased revenue of our firm. So there's also property insurance. So we currently have an office and we want to insure our property, the contents of our office. We also insure the equipment that we have that we use for our business. And this includes automobile insurance, but we'll talk about that separately. But some of the property we have for our business would be equipment that we use for our business, like testing equipment and so forth. Or you might have a construction business that has equipment that you use for the business that you need to insure. So automobile insurance is the type of insurance that you have if you have company-owned vehicles, and which we do at PE Services. And then we also allow our employees to use their own personal vehicle on the job. Now, when we have contracts with different companies, they require a certain amount of liability insurance for automobiles. In a standard automobile policy, typically that you would have personally, probably has liability limits in the $250,000 to maybe even a $500,000 range. And we're finding that when you're contracting with different agencies, that they a lot of times require a liability limit of about $2 million. So sometimes we have to get a special rider on our general liability insurance policy that provides for insuring, adding the extra insurance on for the personal vehicles that people are driving on the project. So that sometimes creates an issue, and your insurance broker can help you with that. Now there's employment insurance, which is a whole nother category all on its own. And obviously you need employment insurance if you have employees. If you're a single-owned business, self-employed, you don't need to have unemployment insurance or for loss of wages and things like that, or workman's comp insurance. You wouldn't need that if you're a single employer. But most of us have employees, and so we have workman's comp insurance and what's the other one? Unemployment, sorry. I had a mental block there. All right, so moving on, we talked, I probably talked a little bit more in detail about general liability insurance. So oh, okay. Do we have any questions at all? And we're asking people to do it in the chat. Yeah. All right, so as I mentioned before, there's a liability insurance, and so for instance, if someone slips on the sidewalk outside your business, that's covered under the general liability policy. And one thing to note about general liability policy is some contracts require that the business has some kind of a cyber security policy protecting their electronic information. And a cybersecurity policy is not standard to a general liability insurance. And so you would have to have that added on to your general liability insurance as a rider. And that's where your insurance broker can really help you do that. Now,
I want to interrupt.
Sure.
So the cybersecurity insurance is really important. Write a note on the workbook I sent you last night, or make a note for yourself. Ask your insurance. If you already have this insurance, that's great. You probably have some kind of insurance. Talk to your insurance person. Yep. So Lorenzo says yes. So I can help. We can help you. We can tell you what questions to ask. I have several colleagues who have been, quote, held hostage, or their networks have been taken over, or they've had hacking, or they've had all kinds of bad stuff. General liability insurance does not necessarily cover cyber threats. So Jeff, I just want to make sure everybody puts this down as something to check into. And sorry for the interruption, but I'm just going to keep doing it.
That's just fine, Ann. All right, moving on to professional liability insurance. So on our side of the business, and I'm relating stuff to our side of the business, but I'm hoping I can cover some of the other kinds of businesses. So for professional liability insurance that we have is for errors and omissions that may occur in some of the products that we produce, plans and specifications. For construction companies, that you have liability or professional liability insurance for things that may happen during your work process that maybe causes issue, and you need to protect your company for being sued for wrongfully doing something, or there might be an error or something like that. So those are the kinds of insurance that you need for a company that you wouldn't normally need on a personal basis. So there's also property insurance, as I mentioned before. So this is to protect your office equipment. So if you have an office, you want to have insurance for the contents of your office. And then also under the same category under property insurance is equipment used on the job. So as I mentioned, in our business, we have testing equipment that we use on the project, upon projects, and we want to be able to insure that for theft or damage associated with things. We've had employees drive on projects and leave their equipment in an area that's not safe, and it gets hit by another construction vehicle. So we want to be able to protect that. So those are the kinds of things that you want to protect with an insurance policy for equipment. So that could be tools or ladders or anything that you use in your business. You want to be able to have a policy that protects that equipment for your use. So auto insurers, as I mentioned before, when you have employees that are using their personal vehicles on projects that you're working on, sometimes the contracts will have a larger limit of liability that's needed for your vehicles. And so our company vehicles are insured for a $2 million liability, but our personal vehicles typically are not. And they need to have insurance that matches the contract amount. So sometimes we have to get a special rider, and that's usually added to our general liability insurance policy as a rider for personal use vehicles on projects. So as I mentioned, that we're finding now that we need to have that $2 million limit. Ann asked me to ask everyone if that seems like a surprise to to have a liability limit of $2 million. They're not chatty today. Okay. All right. So moving on, there's employment insurance, as I mentioned before. So there's workman's compensation and Minnesota unemployment. And I put 2 links in here. We'll click on these links here and see if they work. So this is the workman's compensation insurance. That's part of MnDOT or the state economic development department. And this site is really, really helpful because it has a lot of information on here that tells you who needs insurance and organizing your business. There's lots of information on this website that I think is really helpful. You know, they have frequently asked questions, what happens if there's injuries and so forth. And these are the types of questions that stumped us for quite some time. And we have one person in our company that's monitoring workman's comp, and he makes sure that we comply with all the requirements associated with it. There's reporting requirements that are required every year on how you did, if there's any claims associated with any of the direct or any of the work that's done on any of your projects. If someone gets hurt or slips or things like that. You know, we've had claims of people slipping on ice in the wintertime. Working on construction projects, that's easy to see that would happen, and it caused them to lose work for a couple of days, and they filed a workman's comp claim, and then that was all reported. That has to be reported to the state when you have a claim. Is that for that? But anyway, this website, as you can see here, it has a whole litany of topics on what's required for workman's comp, and this is just a great resource to go through. And I'm not going to go into detail on any of these sections, but just to point you in the direction that this is the place to find out all the workman's comp insurance, and you can get there with that link that I've provided in the presentation today. Now I got to figure out how to get back to where I was. That might be a challenge. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, nope. Right here. Oh, here. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Amber.
Sorry. All right, we're going to go to this other website. This is the Minnesota unemployment website. So this website is set up for agents and employers. And so when it's set up for agents, that's unemployment insurance. You're usually working with a payroll company that actually does your payroll, and they're actually tied in with the unemployment insurance aspect of the state, and they would manage your premiums and so forth that's paid as far as wages that show up on your employees' pay stubs. So this is the website that we have to have a login. So this, if you have employees, you probably already have this, but if you don't, you'll have to do this. And so you can do an employer login, and then it gets you to actually your web page. And I don't know if I can do that here or not, but let's see. I can't remember what the password is though off the top of my head. Yeah. All right. So you can see here, I logged in and it has our company name here. And this is our employer account number, which sometimes you need. And then this has information on any reporting, tax and wage reporting that needs to be done, and your payment information, where you stand. And I don't know if this has any issues. There's no records available. Let's see. No. All right, so this is information just on our company. So this is some payments that we made, and it shows that we made the payment and that our balance is zero. So anyway, this information that's kept current on this is really kept current by our payroll company. And then, so the only time I really need to get in here is to view the unemployment insurance, I guess, rate that we have, and that's used to calculate what's what we have to pay for each hour that an employee works on the project. So do we have any questions at all that anyone has on unemployment insurance?
So Jeff, I want to interrupt here. For somebody who's in a new business, this can be really confusing. And I have to tell you that I was getting notes from the Minnesota Unemployment Office telling me what my rate was, and I had no idea what that meant. And frankly, I just filed them like, what does this even mean? So what that means is just what Jeff said. Your unemployment payments will be based on the amount of work you do and the number of claims your company has. And so that rate will constantly change. Now, Jeff mentioned that we have a payroll company. And so some of you may do your own payroll. If you do your own payroll, then you have to manage sending in your unemployment insurance payments. Jeff showed you the login. If you don't have that, you need to get it and make sure that you're up to date on that. And if you're not, set a meeting up with us, because we can explain this in more detail. I'm noticing we're not getting a lot of questions, and that's okay. I just want you to know that anything that you have a question about, write down that you may not want to talk about out loud. Write it down, and when we meet as a follow-up, if that's something that you request, we can go through those questions then. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, I was trying to, I don't go on this website very often. I was trying to find where our actual rate number is. And unfortunately, I don't know exactly where it is. Ross, you don't happen to know off the top of your head, do you? I think it's under.
Oh, I don't. They send you a letter every year too. That's
yeah,
what I got
no.
in the file
Here it is. View tax rate Yeah, so here it is. So this is our rate for this year. It's 2.46. And as Ann mentioned, it changes every year. And I don't know if I think there's a way you can look what your history is and you can see that it changes over time. But so you can see here is the benefits charge, and this is our payroll number here at our percentage at 2.46. And so it's totally based on the wages. And then I'm not sure what this number here is, what changes over time. And so that or this number here is what changes over time. So anyway, so sorry about that. I was trying to find that when I was on the website earlier, and I couldn't remember exactly where it was. All right. So now I have to minimize this, get back. All right. So any more questions on employment insurance? So I think we're going to move on to bonding.
Jeff, one more question about employment insurance.
Okay.
If you don't have any employees, do you still need that insurance?
I do not think you do. If you're if you have a single owned business, or it's just you running your business, you don't have unemployment insurance because you don't qualify for it as a self-employed business. So for instance, Ann, when Ann owned the business, and if let's say the business failed and she no longer had a business, she would not qualify for unemployment benefits because the owners of the firms do not qualify for unemployment. That's as far as I know. All right. Now we're going to talk a little bit about bonding, and I have to apologize. I'm not an authority on bonding, but bonding and insurance is needed for people that bid on projects. And so there are several people that introduce themselves today that are actually in the construction business, and they're actually working on construction contracts. And so a lot of contracts, if you're a prime contractor and you're bidding on a project, you're usually required to have a performance and payment bond. And a typical amounts for performance and payment bond is 100% of the value of the contract. So if you're bidding on a contract that is $500,000, you have to have a performance bond that's equal to that amount of the bid. And then a lot of contracts require a payment bond in the same amount. So basically you have to have a bonding amount associated with your contract that's 200% of the value of the contract. So the bond protects the owner from contractor's lack of performance. So for instance, if you had a contractor that failed to perform on a project, the owner can then use that bond to actually fire that contractor and hire a new contractor and finish the project out. And Ross, you told me a story the other day about a contract that you recently had that this happened exactly. And it's really, this bonding is protecting the owner and not the employer. So if you're the one that has the bonding insurance, then ideally you'd like it to never have to be used, because you're doing good work and you're doing it on schedule and you're paying your subcontractors in a timely manner, so that these bonds don't ever get used if you're doing good work. So any questions on bonding? It's a really quick topic here, but.
Yeah, and it's usually in your contract, right? Jeff, that,
Yes.
and a lot of you guys are gonna be subcontractors, so your bonding requirement, could be completely covered by the prime, or they may require you to have a bond for your work too, but as a subcontractor, it's gonna be a little bit different for you. And like I said, I've seen it both ways. If you have a major work type, then maybe they make you bond for your portion of the contract. And I think your company is bonded for a certain value of work every year. And then you just have to get projects named under that bond, I think is kind of how that works, is that, and then that's, so if you can do $5 million worth of work in a year, you'll go get a bond for $5 million, and then you'll add projects to that up until it adds up to that limit, and they'll keep adding it to each project or each project to it. And the bonding company kind of has a good idea of your finances and knows that you can make payments, you are making payments, you have a good track record. So they might ask for quite a bit of information before they give you a bond. So just kind of think through that it's obviously necessary, and it's good protection if something went wrong, that you some key person got sick and wasn't able to perform the work, or especially in a small business, it's key to have those things covered for you.
All right, thanks, Ross.
Jeff, I
Yep.
want to answer Lorena, or I guess it's Amber's question. The difference between the two types of bonds, a performance bond is something that will pay for your work to be completed if your work can't be completed. So if a general or an agency has to hire somebody to do the work that they expected you to do, and because you didn't finish it, that's a performance bond. A payment bond covers all your bills. So if you go out of business, this would cover any outstanding bills to other contractors or to suppliers.
Yes.
Is that clear, Amber? And I think that a payment bond is required regardless if you're a sub or a general, because if a general hires you and you don't pay your material suppliers, the general would be liable. So I'm pretty sure they would require you to always have a payment bond.
Yeah, and that payment bond, like the one that I was involved with a couple of summers ago, that was how the contractor got in trouble. Was it was a bituminous paving project, and he wasn't paying the supplier, and then pretty soon the supplier won't give him material anymore, and then it kind of snowballed on him on a whole pile of projects that he wasn't able to complete the work. But so they did most of the work on that contract, and then we did have to hire somebody to clean up the end of the project, but they weren't performing on a lot of things. But we did have a lot of money we had paid him that he never paid to his sub, and they had done the work, and suppliers. So
one thing I failed to mention earlier was certificate of insurance. So we're required, our business is required to provide certificate of insurance to all our clients, if you will. And I was going to see if I could find one here. This isn't where I want to go. I probably should look this up before. Okay. All right. I was going to show you what a certificate of insurance looks like. And I should have had one pulled up here, but I didn't. That's because I just thought about it. All right. Well, now, and I think we were supposed to do some activity, right?
Yep. So I am going
Okay, I want
You
to
look-
stop sharing it. Let's see.
If you look under operations,
You're
Jeff,
gonna
there
send
it's
an
under
email?
insurance certificates.
Well, there's not a slide for it. This?
No, that's you're sharing the schedule. I want you to share the certificate of insurance.
Oh, I haven't found it yet.
Give us 1 second. All right, you guys should be getting a worksheet right now that just has you take a few minutes and write down, either print it and write it, or just do it right on your computer, what your insurance needs are. Okay, so look at Jeff, why don't we take this time? Well, you guys have the workbook, so go back through the notes that Jeff just talked about and make a note for yourself as to what insurance needs you have. So watch for that. It should be in your inbox. All right, so as Jeff continues to find it, looks like everybody is getting it right now. I'm going to share the activity. Okay. All right, so just take a few minutes here and go through the notes. I'm thinking that Lisa, you probably don't have the workbook, so I will send that to you right away. But go through the notes that Jeff already covered. And most importantly, think about these two. What business insurance do I need, or what kind of information do I need? And this will just be a quick reference in case we meet and talk about your insurance needs together. All right. So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes while you jot some ideas down. All right, does everybody have that inventory? And maybe just make a few notes to yourself. I noted that on page 2 of the workbook, if you look at it electronically, all of the links that Jeff has been going through are listed there. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing, and Jeff's just going to briefly show you what a certificate of insurance looks like.
Hopefully everyone can see my screen here. So this is a certificate of insurance. So this is a standard insurance form, the standard Accord form here. And this is a certificate of insurance that we provided to Kimley Horn. And you can see here where the certificate holder is. Now, some companies require you to have certain language down in the certificate holder. And they'll ask you to add that to it. And so this particular certificate shows our commercial general liability insurance, and it shows the values associated with that. And then it also has an umbrella policy, and it shows the values for that part of the insurance. And then down on the bottom, we have our professional liability insurance policy, and it shows those values. We also have one here. Here's the one for our auto insurance. And you can see here that we have that single limit of 2 million associated with that. So the certificate insurance, in this case, we have 2 of them. One of them shows the general liability and professional liability, and this one shows the automobile liability insurance. So that's just a good example of.
And where do you get these, Jeff?
So a lot of times you go back to your broker that you have, and you ask them to get them for you, or you have to go back to your actual insurance policy that you have and request the certificate of insurance. And this is something that happens, your policy renews every year, and you have to renew them every year and then send them out. So we have this whole process that we do once our policy time period expires, and then we request these certificate of insurance, then send them out to our clients. So we have about 24 of these that we have to get each year. Actually 24 times 2, because they don't a single insurance certificate doesn't include all the different types of insurance in a single form. You have to have separate ones for different companies. So there's multiple forms associated with each of our clients then.
And so just a tip that I picked up from Jeff, but we keep a log of everybody that we send these out throughout the year. So as we get a new contract, we'll add that to the log so we know who has these. And then we review that log when we get new insurance and see if we're still under contract with those people. And then we just, like Jeff said, then we just send it out. But it's a good idea to just keep a spreadsheet of everybody that you send that out to. So next year when you got to resend them out, you don't have to poke through emails and try to find them or find a different way. But just staying organized with a lot of these things is build efficiency into what you're doing.
All right. All right. Ann, did you want to talk any more about your activity? Yeah. Okay. So now, now I want to talk a little bit about this pre-award audit information that is required by a lot of MnDOT contracts. And there's a checklist and a questionnaire that needs to be filled out. And this is a whole another topic that probably doesn't lend itself for this shorter class time, but I'm going to click on this this link here.
Jeff, I am sending them the sample overhead spreadsheet right now.
Okay. So on some contracts with MnDOTs, they require a pre-award audit, and there's a checklist associated with that audit. And as I mentioned, this is a pretty comprehensive list. So I actually have one in my file here. Let's see. So this is an audit checklist, and these are all the things. So one of the first things that's on the list is this pre-award audit questionnaire, which I'll show you in a second. But they also require a lot of financial information from your company. So they want to see your balance sheet, your income statement, your P&L statement. They have questions. If it's a sole proprietor, they want to see your tax returns, a listing of all your chart of accounts. Usually you have a report or a letter from a previous audit. You could give them your direct cost summary, examples of employee spreadsheets, expense reports. I'm not even sure what this management representation statement, it's the last page of the questionnaire. So that's part included in the questionnaire. Fee schedule and billing schedule, if that applies, fixed hourly rate calculation, vehicle billing, direct billings for actual mileage logs for company vehicles and so forth. So it's a very comprehensive list, and I'm not going to talk in detail about any of these. I did want to pull up the actual questionnaire. Oops, I already had that out. So this questionnaire, it's quite extensive. It's 19 pages long, and it goes through all the information on your company, and it asks you real specific questions about how much revenue you generate in certain sectors of your business lines and so forth. One of the pages on the questionnaire is common unallowable costs. So we're going to do a session. Ross is actually going to do a session coming up that talks about overhead computation. And this really comes into play. And so there are some expenses that are incurred by your company that are not allowable in an overhead. And they usually have to do with marketing efforts of the company, or any kind of entertainment expenses that you may have. You can see on the very bottom of the list, it says alcoholic beverages. Those are not allowable as cost to show in your overhead. And so, as I mentioned, Ross will be talking about this in detail when we get to that overhead computation, but this is part of the questionnaire. And so they tell you when you're calculating your overhead. So that in this questionnaire, you actually go through that computation, the things that are not allowed in your not allowed in the overhead computation. And then this form is submitted then with your audit information that has that checklist of information that I talked about here. So it has all these
The pre-award audit will also list your insurance requirements. And so that's why we included it as part of this class. These, again, are only required for professional technical projects. So Rose and Michelle on the call, this would be appropriate for you, but it's also interesting for non-professional technical companies to take a look at what is overhead. So we wanted to include this, as well as Jeff's just going to talk about it briefly. And if I sound like I'm talking funny, it's because I'm hearing myself.
So I just really briefly described this process. As you can see, just by the number of items on this checklist, it's quite an arduous task to perform this each time. So to be perfectly honest, this is the part of the business that I hate the most. And usually when you have to do this for a contract, there's usually multiple contracts throughout the year that you may have to submit this information. So if you gather at one time, you usually have that information stored in a folder someplace on your network, and you can easily grab that information. The financial statement usually it has to be changed because they want something a little bit more current. So you can grab those off of your accounting software and submit the new ones, and then just use the same information that you had you'd been asked for before, because a lot of this stuff doesn't change throughout the year. Any questions?
Oh, sorry, Jeff. I just want to offer up that when I first started my company, I didn't have a lot of these forms. And so I had to work with my accountant. So you can start a business with lots of things not set into place, but you really need an accountant. So I asked my accountant for things like a balance sheet or a list of accounts. Some of the stuff I didn't even know what it was. And then, of course, I had to create some of the other things. I had to create a timesheet, and I had to create a actual mileage log. So some of the stuff is not hard to do. You just have to do it. So if if you need help with that, we can help you with that too.
And just to follow on some of the stuff that's on the bottom, they require, as a part of the questionnaire, they'll ask you for different policies. What's your company's policy on vacation and sick leave? And what's your company's policy on bonuses and so forth? And so there's questions throughout the questionnaire that actually ask you what those policies are. And then they ask you to submit that policy as a part of this audit package. So, so Ann, did you want me, it looks like I'm supposed to go into details of calculating the overhead sheet. There's an activity. Did you have an activity plan? Okay.
So yes, just as a an example, we're getting to the end here, but I wanted to, maybe Jeff, could I just take it over and talk about overhead for a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So I just sent everybody, so if you could stop sharing. I just sent everybody the overhead calculation sheet. And so if you open up your email, this came directly from let me share this. This came directly from MnDOT's website. So now I need to share. So this came from MnDOT's pre-award audit sheet that Jeff just had, and we clicked into it. Now, I know I have a lot of contractors on the line right here. Keep listening. Overhead is an important part of your business, whether you are going to be billing as a contractor or you're going to be billing as a professional technical firm. So I'm professional technical. When we bill using our overhead. As a contractor, you still should know what your overhead is, especially as you start a new business. It's important to think about everything that it really costs you to do business. And I want to say to every one of you out there, when you're starting a business, a lot of the work that you do as a business owner goes unaccounted for. Start keeping track of every hour you work on your business. As you can see here, the overhead is made up of two parts. Direct labor, this is money that you are able to charge for, or this is money that your company pays for, and then that is measured against the money that you receive. So if you're not paying yourself, start paying yourself. You need to show that you have costs of doing business. And at the beginning of your business, one of the biggest costs of doing business is your time. What were you saying?
I was just agreeing with you, Ann. So the other thing I wanted to mention is on that questionnaire, that list of things that are unallowable. They talk about unallowable costs. So there's expenses associated that are unallowable, but there's also labor that's unallowable. So for instance, if you're attending a trade show and you're have a booth there, the time spent at that trade show is not allowable to be in your overhead because it's considered marketing.
Yeah, so basically what overhead is this, and Jeff can correct me if I misstep. Overhead is the cost of doing business. So if I pay myself $10 an hour, but it has cost me $100. Okay, how can I make this easy?
$20 an hour.
But it costs me $20 an hour to work. And you might think, well, why would it cost you $20? Well, the labor is 10, but on top of that, I have to rent a office, I have to have a computer, I have to have health insurance, I have to have paper, all these other things, right? So overhead is what it costs to employ me. So it's not just the wages, it's the cost of me working. Okay, so it's complicated, and Jeff and I can certainly go through this with you, but even as a contractor, your overhead includes your time. It includes all your gas, it includes your trucks, it includes your garage, it includes your rent, it includes your insurance, all of that stuff. So a good place to start, we're not talking about setting rates in this class, but I will say that a good place to start in setting rates, because you don't know what your overhead is when you start, is look at where you used to work, what was the rate they charged for you, or look at some of your peers. And you can see here, so you have this worksheet, and whether you're a contractor or professional technical, look at these things and they will prompt you to think, oh yeah, that is a cost of doing business, right? Do you have bank service charges? Do you have dues? Do you have insurance? Do you have certificates? Do you have licenses? Do you have rent? What's your telephone? All of these things. So that's why I included it, because I want everybody to be thinking about their overhead, whether they're a professional technical company or they are a trucking firm or a demo firm or a snow removal firm. You all have overhead, and your time is worth something. All right. I see we have a chat. All right. So Jeff, maybe if you just open it up for questions, I'm going to look through the chat and see if there's any questions here.
Yeah, and can you just scroll down to your sheet to the bottom where it says those notes? So that list of things in that questionnaire that are unallowable, they're in this spreadsheet here, there's a column for unallowable cost, and then there's a note associated with it. And down at the bottom here is an explanation of what was taken out of their overhead calculation. And as you can see on this particular spreadsheet, over $200,000 worth of costs associated with running this business were not allowed to be in their overhead, so they had to take that off. And then the computation then takes your direct salary rate, and then it divides into it the actual overhead, and that's how it calculates this 127.63%. So you can see how that $200,000 amount that was disallowed really impacted the rate of their overhead, but those are costs associated that are not allowed according to the FAR regulation. This is a federal regulation associated with overhead. So you can see here there's personal use of company vehicles. There's contribution or gifts. So like if you're donating, if your business is donating to a charity, that's not allowed to be in the overhead. Your interest is not allowed. So for instance, if your company has to borrow money to make payroll because of cash flow issues and so forth, the interest paid on that borrowed money is not allowed to be in your overhead. And so those kinds of things can impact your overhead quite substantially. And so obviously you want to minimize that as much as possible. And so there's, you can just see the whole list there of things that were not allowed for, and it added up, the total amount of the overhead for this particular calculation was 2.7 million. And you can see that it was substantial, 200,000. So I don't know what percentage that is, about 8% maybe. That's a significant amount. So those are the kinds of things that you need to be aware of when you're tracking these expenses. And I'd mentioned earlier that on that pre-audit list, they want a list of your chart of accounts. So those are all the different accounting categories that are associated with your accounting program that keeps track of what's allowable and what's not. And they categorize things so that you can easily pick out the things that are allowed in the overhead and dismiss the ones that are not.
If you don't have an accounting system yet, please don't worry about it. I started out with a simple Excel spreadsheet, and that served me well for years. I do recommend a spreadsheet. Don't keep it, you can keep it in a notebook, but then transfer it to a spreadsheet. Because you want to be keeping track of all your costs. This is important for overhead, but it's also important for taxes and in case you get audited, right? So you really want to make sure that you're keeping good notes. And if you're a sole proprietor or if you're just in business by yourself, sometimes it's pretty easy to lose track of time or lose track of expenses. And so build that habit right now. And as you grow your business, you'll just build on top of that.
Stop sharing and you can go back to your presentation.
I have to share though, I think. All right, well, part of the overhead computation, and again, Ross is going to go through this in detail. Is there's 4 elements of overhead calculation. There's direct labor, so that's labor that's charged to a project, and indirect labor is the time spent to run your business. So, for instance, if you have administrative activities you're doing for your business, accounting and so forth, that's considered indirect labor. And that goes actually into your overhead. Your direct labor is charged directly to the project. And then, as I mentioned, there's the allowable and unallowable costs. So allowable costs would be like rent and utilities and insurance, employee benefits, equipment costs, so any costs associated with buying equipment and so forth. Legal and accounting fees are an allowable cost. Office supplies, software. Anytime you do any kind of training associated with your staff, either safety training or professional development, the tuition is allowable cost. But then their time spent to do training is considered indirect labor. So there's the costs associated with going to a class, and then there's the indirect labor associated with their time spent in that class. So as I mentioned on that page 16 of the questionnaire, it talks about all the unallowable costs. So we kind of went through that pretty detailed already. So that those are the actual computations. And so the actual computation, and I guess I didn't summarize that in a formula, if you will, but it's your direct labor divided by your indirect labor divided by your direct labor, and then or your allowable costs. Pull that spreadsheet up again, and it has the calculation right in it. Not yet. So here's your fringe benefits and general overhead is 2.7 million. And then they subtract out the unallowable costs. So you got 2.4. And then your general overhead, that's your indirect cost. And then so it's 2.4 divided by 1.4. And then that's how they get the computation of 127%. Is that right?
So that means that for every dollar you pay somebody to work, MnDOT will reimburse you for that dollar
Dollar
plus
plus 27 cents.
plus
Dollar.
20 cents.
Yeah. So if you bill $1, then if you have $1 of direct labor, then you're billing $2.27 for that dollar.
Yeah, Jeff, you said it wrong. I mean, you said it right at the end, but initially you said it wrong. So it costs an employer $1.27 to employ that person on top of the dollar they pay them. So
Right. And then there's another part of the equation that we're really not talking about, and that's profit. So your fee that you charge your client, or MnDOT in this case, since we're talking about MnDOT, would be your direct labor times your overhead, and then you're allowed a certain percent of profit associated with that combined number. So for the $2.27, then you can add a percent profit, and the percent profit is determined usually by the project. And it ranges anywhere from, I think, from 13 to 15%, or 9 to 15%, depending on what the computation is. Usually, if you have a very low overhead rate, they allow you to start at 13% profit, and up to a maximum of 15%.
all right, Jeff, why don't you show the last slide and we'll wrap it up.
So here you reminded people to submit your evaluation. And
So I'll take this slide. So you'll be getting an evaluation later today. And one of the questions on the evaluation is whether you want a follow-up meeting. I've already been texting with some people who have been asking me for a follow-up, so we'll schedule those by email. And if you didn't put it in the chat, but you want a meeting, there's my email right there, and.johnson@peservices.com. Eric is the co-teacher on most of these classes. He's not here today. You can also contact Jeff directly with questions about insurance, and we will send you in the direction to find the answers if we don't know it. And then there's 2 classes coming up in the next few weeks. Ross Gentic, as I said before, and he introduced himself, is going to be talking about contract negotiations. Again, this is probably more targeted at professional technical firms, but I think everyone who is on the call would be benefiting from hearing that. And then 2 weeks later, from 8 to 9:30, again, we have responding to an RFP. Now, all of these classes are typically offered in hybrid format. This one was not, because Jeff and I were traveling. So next Wednesday, if you'd like to come in person, you certainly are able and welcome to join us at PE Services, which is just west of Bedema-Casca, or Lake Calhoun, as it was formerly called. And I will send the directions for that when I send the reminders. I noted that we have 2 people that joined online, and I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Ahmed, can you just tell us who you are and what your business does?
Yes, my name is Ahmed Ali with Safa Construction. Can you hear me?
yes,
Okay. Ahmed Ali with Safa Construction Services. I do demolition and post cleaning.
Demolition and what?
Post cleaning.
Oh, okay. And then Renee, I saw you joined in.
Yes, I'm Renee. I am Blair Construction Cleaner. I also do demolition and final cleans, post clean. Okay.
Say, Renee, I got a note that your workbook did not come through. If you did not receive a workbook, either just put it in the chat or say a quick, no, I didn't get it.
Where is the workbook?
So I must have the wrong email for you. So put your correct email in the chat and I'll make sure to send it out again. All right.
Okay. Yep.
All right. With that, I know we gave you a lot of information today. Mostly our objective was to tell you about all the different types of insurance so that you now know what you maybe didn't know before. Okay, so take some notes on that activity 1 that I sent you. Give us a call or follow up meeting request, and we'll be happy to go through some of your individual questions. And then if you emailed me or texted me in the chat, I'll follow up as well.
And
Oh.
just to summarize, my one point is to try to find an insurance broker that you would like to work with that's going to help you shop out these different insurances for you.
Yeah, an insurance broker is really helpful, not only in finding good rates and finding different opportunities, but just in guiding you to what kind of coverage you need. So the minimum coverage you need is what's required by contract. That may or may not be good enough for the kind of work you do. So your insurance broker could offer you some really well researched advice on that, and we recommend it. We're not saying who you shouldn't get insurance with, but find someone that you trust and they can lead you through some of these questions. We've never had an insurance claim, knock on wood, in 25 years, 28 years, but I'm fine with that. You know, paying for insurance is just a cost of business. And then you also are required to have it to work on any type of government jobs. So I can see a few people are asking questions. Again, this recording will be posted on the MnDOT Small Business website, and we are available for any questions, and I'll send out those workbooks to the 3 students that registered just recently. All right, anything else before we say have a great day? All right, let me take some notes here on who still needs things. All right, thanks, Jeff, for the good information. And
You're very welcome.
have a great day. We hope to see you next Wednesday at 8 o'clock when we're talking about negotiating a contract. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.